going to turn it over to our awesome presenters, Stacy, Mollee, and Chris. Thank you so much for being with us.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to jump right in and introduce myself real quick. I'm Stacy Lovdahl, and I am the Innovative Learning Catalyst for the western part of the state, which means that I get to do professional development and innovative learning experiences for teachers and educators from basically the middle of the Piedmont Triad to Tennessee. And that meant that before the pandemic, I had a very close relationship with I-40. And since the pandemic, I've just been, figuring out ways to do things virtually, which in a way is exactly where we've all been for the past over a year. So, let me throw it over to Mollee real quick so she can do a quick intro.
So I'm on the opposite side. I'm the Innovative Learning Catalyst for the East. So that means from the very top of Corolla all the way down to Brunswick County. I cover the coastal area, and then over to where my friend Chris Beneck lives in Wilson. That's about my border. But as Stacy just said, pretty much everything we've been doing is virtual, and lines are blurred. And that's kind of the fun part about it, is we get to do stuff like this together and talk to teachers and educators across the state. So I was formerly a librarian in Dare County, but I still consider myself part of the Dare Librarian Squad, and excited to talk with you. I was at NCDLC, and I know, Stacy, I don't think you mentioned that. We're both NCDLCN alums. And then we adopted Chris. Chris did not formally go through the process, but he's adopted into the family. So Chris, over to you.
All right, so I won't go through and repeat everything that they said. I too am an Innovative Learning Catalyst. My area is the central part of the state. So basically from the Virginia line to the South Carolina line, and from about Edgecombe County all the way to the far side of Alamance County. So they kind of draw a line down there. That's more or less my region. And I'm just happy that they adopted me and I'm able to come along for the ride.
Okay, so we thought that we would start off our engagement section that the Friday Institute has allowed us to do with you guys today, and just do first a quick little shout out to all of the ways that you guys who are tuned in right now who have connected with your parents and families and students as things have changed. It seems like, at least in my home district of Catawba County, we've just seen a lot of adapting and changing. So if you would find the chat, and I see Molly's posted a comment in there, but where are you coming from? Where are you zooming in from? And if you would pick your top way that you've been able to connect with your students and families, what would it be? Yay, Carrie. Yay, boom, boom, boom. Kannapolis, Burlington, I see Fayetteville. We are all over the place. I'm going to say that's one of the silver linings, is that we get to connect with people, from literally all the corners of the state using our virtual format. Love Asheville. It's gorgeous out here today. So, I have 3 tips for connecting home and school. But first, I want to say a really quick thing about the term learning loss and why this matters. We've heard it in the media a lot, social media a lot, definitely. I've seen a study that says that up to 30% loss in reading skills and maybe up to 50% in math skills. So clearly the pandemic and all of these fluctuations in-person teaching are going to have some kind of an impact. But on the other hand, and Mollee, jump in here, because I know we've had some discussions about all the things that students have learned during the past year or so with this type of situation.
Yeah, I think we just, need to avoid using the deficit language of learning loss. Like we all know here in Dare County, we're calling it a learning gap, which I think is a fair way of saying that we do have some things that we want to, make some progress on. But I love just thinking instead about the idea of what have kids learned. They've learned a lot of resilience. They've learned a lot of independence and responsibility. They've learned to, kind of put learning in their own hands. I think a lot of times I think of my elementary kids who were very expectant of their teacher to provide a lot of that structure. And instead they've learned to be a little bit more independent and take learning into their own hands, whether it be, like we were just saying, it might be that their STEM learning was building their own skateboard ramp. You know, there's things that kids have been doing and learning how to garden, learning how to help around the house with cooking and things. So I just think it's part of, you know, how can we use the language of what have they learned instead of what are they missing? So.
And build from there, you know. So 2 areas of concern, obviously, for connecting home and school are, you know, parents want to know how their kids are doing, and they want to be able to connect, you know, to have it be more than, you know, my student has, but what, you know, a little bit more than that. One of the wisest things that my first year principal, and basically every principal that I ever had, said to me was, make those calls at the beginning of the year before anything happens, before you have like a reason. Make sure that you've laid the groundwork at the beginning of the year. But honestly, who answers the actual phone anymore? If you get parents by phone, then, you know, put a thumbs up in the chat, because, you know, there are just so many ways, different ways to connect with parents. So some of the ideas that I've seen work, I've put a few up here, is first of all, figure out where they are. So I'm gonna kind of start in the middle with the social media plus Hootsuite, is having some kind of a survey that figures out, you know, of course we collect the information from parents, but where are they? Where, you know, what method do they prefer? And if it is social media and you're thinking, oh my gosh, that's one more place that I have to remember to go to do something. And if you're, you know, if you're updating Power School, and, you know, my school, we were required to put in grades by a certain time each week. They had, you know, our weekly grades had to be updated. So if you know that in advance, then you could, create a Facebook page, or you know, some kind of a social media page, if it's okay with your district, you know, following your district policies and guidelines, and with reminders for parents, right? And then key thing is, things get busy. So do you have time every Thursday to send out the reminder? Maybe, maybe not. So there's a free site called Hootsuite, and you can put in and schedule your reminders to go out automatically. So if you know that there are certain things that you want to go out every Thursday at 4:30 or something like that, you can put them into Hootsuite. Now you can add a whole bunch of other things in there too to schedule them, but use the power of kind of pre-planning in advance to get some of those routine communications out. So that's outside of maybe your Google Classroom or your Canvas or whatever learning management system that you might be using. The other idea that I want to share real quick is Flipgrid. I worked with, as an ITF for Catawba County, one of my schools was an elementary school, and they use Flipgrid over the summer to connect with the families of the kids who are coming in for the next school year. And each teacher does a real quick, you know, looking forward to seeing you next year in my classroom. So, you know, this is Miss Lovdahl, and, you know, this is my backyard, and I love gardening. So, you know, that whole entire, you know, about me section that you would send home to your parents, they did on a Flipgrid. And then they shared that out with the community. So the students could all, and the families could all click on their teacher and see a little intro. Really easy to do. And they were some of the cutest things I had ever seen. And I learned things, and they did the entire staff. They did teachers, they did the front office people, the custodians, the cafeteria, everybody. So that was super cool. And then the last idea that I want to share with you, because I definitely want to not use up too much of everybody else's time, is this idea of virtual open houses. Like Brittany was saying at the beginning, we've all learned way more about virtual Zooms, Google Meets, all the things in the last year. And one of the positives has been that parents and families who work non-traditional hours have been able to attend a Zoom conference when they may not have been able to actually physically be there in person. So one of my hopes is that we find a way to continue doing that even when, I don't know, we return to normal, and keep having avenues to connect with all of our families using them, you know, both in person, which has a lot of benefits, but also virtual formats like Zoom or Google Meet. So that is my section. Next up is Chris, and he has some super awesome ideas for brain breaks. Chris, over to you.
Yeah, so we're real big believers in the use of brain breaks in order to increase student engagement and increase retention and just basically help our students and ourselves to make sure that we're focused all the time and doing what we need to be doing. So there's 3 things on this slide just real quick that I'm going to share with you. Each one of them is going to be a link that we'll drop in the chat. The first link is on why. So why would we use brain breaks? Well, when we click on that, it's going to take you to some information, and it's going to give you a brief overview or a real good brainy quote on why to use brain breaks. But we like to keep it in regular language. And so, there's 8 major points into why using brain breaks is a great idea, not only in a virtual world, but in face-to-face classrooms as well. And we run into a lot of times teachers saying that they don't have time to use brain breaks because they have to cover their material. They only have a certain amount of time to cover that material. And, one of the reasons for using them is it's actually research science-based that the use of brain breaks and getting your students refocused every so often actually increases their time on task. That increased time on task, it relieves stress for your students and yourself, which that reducing stress leads to better behavior. When you have less behavior issues in class, then obviously the learning environment is going to be better, which is going to enhance comprehension as well. And the use of these brain breaks, a major thing about them that we really like is the idea that they sort of add or cultivate that classroom culture that we want to have. So as hard a time as it's been when we've been in the virtual world, to create that student and teacher bond or to create that classroom culture, this is something that we can do to aid in that endeavor and to help us to make that a thing. And then that, of course, can carry over into the face-to-face classroom. The other 2 things I have up here, the first one is 20-20-20. If you're not sure where to start with a brain break, this is the simplest, easiest way to do so. A 20-20-20, this not only helps us to refocus, but this is good for our eye health as well. Staring at these screens all the time has kind of wreaked havoc on some of our eyes. I know it has on mine. So if you can set it into your schedule for every 20 minutes to take a 20-second break and have your students and yourself look at least 20 feet away from the screen. Again, that's the simplest, easiest thing to do. We usually do it. Stacy, Mollee, and I usually do this, in our sessions as well. We'll tell Google to set a timer or Alexa to set a timer, and we'll take that 20 seconds and we'll continue to talk, but we've at least looked away from our screen for 20 seconds. This takes 0 preparation, right? We don't have to do anything. There's no bells and whistles to this one, but it does allow for your eyes to get a quick break and helps us out. So 20-20-20 is a great resource for us. The last link down there where it says choices, we're going to put that in there, and choices is going to take you to a list of 12 actual physical brain breaks that we really like to use. And each of those 12 is linked to a YouTube video where it demonstrates those brain breaks for you. I have it set up so that when you go to the link, it's just a full screen video of the actual brain break itself and just the segment. So you don't have to worry about it going to an ad. You don't have to worry about it, giving you a bunch of comments or anything like that along with the video. It's just very straightforward. This is the segment of the video that you need. And down or on the page under that on the PDF is a link to, a force copy for a brain breaks choice board that you can take and use. We encourage you to use it, remix it, change it, do anything that you need to with it. That includes all 12 of those actual physical brain breaks, along with the links to the videos, as well as a timer for using them. We suggest if you can't do 20-20-20, maybe at least do a brain break every 30 minutes, try to put in at least a minute for it. There's a timer included on the slide. that, you know, we'll do this for you. And then also there's a randomizer and a spinner up there if you're having a problem deciding which brain breaks to do. The brain breaks choice board is broken into 42 slides, but the first 40 are on the randomizer and the spinner. So you can spin the wheel or spin the randomizer and use that to choose the slide that you're going to go with. So we encourage you to make a copy of that, take it, use it, do whatever you want to with it, and contact us if you find other really cool brain breaks that you can use. I see Brad said he tossed a pin 3 times. So, you know, that's one of them. The pin toss is a great one. There's other ones as well out there. So that's my little spiel on using brain breaks to refocus and re-engage our students and to actually increase time on task, even though we're taking time off. So now I'm going to toss it over to Mollee.
And we do a whole session. I mean, this was the quickest way that Chris could cover our brain breaks, but we can talk about it for 50 minutes or an hour because we know how to do that. But we do think, like Brad said, it's really just giving your brain a little moment. But the benefits that taking that few seconds away really adds up. That's what we've learned. So, well, I'm going to do a quick cover of library media and literacy and how do we engage students that way. I think that, you know, I know this is again, really quick way of covering a lot of different ideas, but, you know, what I wanted to bring to your attention, if you will, is that when we talk about libraries, I think often we default to books. And I don't know a librarian that went into this profession without loving books. So obviously literacy is a natural tie-in, but I think it goes way beyond that. And if you look at the 6 images on the screen there in front of you, these are actually the standards that were adopted in 2018 by our national governing body for libraries, the American Association for School Libraries. I don't know about you, but I don't see books as one of those 6 things. But what I do see is a lot of ties to just about every content area and really skills that we want our kids to develop. And librarians, you know, that's kind of my job, is to promote the work that happens in libraries. And I just wanted you to, you know, kind of frame this idea that when we talk about libraries and literacies, we don't only speak about books, because libraries are more than book museums, and librarians are way more than guardians of the books. So, you know, I think, again, it's easy to tie books and literacy, or books and libraries, to literacy, but I think that it's important not to forget that literacy does come in layers. And that's another thing that the 3 of us can talk about for many, many hours, but I'll keep it to a few minutes. I have about 1 million examples of things that I could give you from ways that I think librarians have engaged students in the last year and several months, based on a lot of conversations I've had and things that I've done myself here in Dare County with the librarians. But I want to really take a few minutes to reflect on that definition of literacy, and maybe your idea of working with the librarian might evolve in this time as well. So if you'll switch over to the next one, there's a quote, because it's School Library Month. That's another reason for me to, you know, toot the horn of librarians. It's School Library Month in April. And this quote from the director here in Dare County, Dr. Ashley McBride, is a colleague and my boss. And I think it really encompasses what the mission of the library is. It's that, you know, really, no matter who you are or where you come from, librarians really are very literate in cultural awareness and inclusion. And for years, librarians have been building safe spaces, diverse collections, and equitable practices in libraries in order to best serve and engage students. And I think that it's important to remember that those new worlds in the library don't just happen through a book that you check out and return, that libraries are a place to go and discover and get hands-on. I don't know about you, but I was actually just talking within the last hour with Chris and Stacy about maker spaces, robotics, STEM classes, STEM activities. All these things happen in libraries to discover new worlds. And I think that the other thing to keep in mind is it's a low stakes place, that a lot of times kids flourish in a place like a library or an art room or the music room because of the low stakes. There's no testing, there's no grades, or oftentimes there are no grades and no testing. And that's just a really good place for the librarian or the art teacher or the music teacher, whomever, to connect with students on a different level. And again, if you're thinking about how do I engage or connect with a student, talking to one of these specialists, whether it be a librarian or another specialist in your building, is a great way to learn something new about a student and maybe find a way to connect with them and you know, again, bring them out. A lot of kids are exhausted of a screen, but maybe you can find out if they play an instrument or really love a specific kind of book. So again, those are some really helpful things. I could also talk for like a long time about some of the ways that the librarians in Dare County have done this, but I've already done that. We have a podcast episode that we put out on Moments of Inspiration, where we interviewed several of the librarians from Dare County, specifically asking them how have they engaged students academically, with literacy, and then most importantly, probably socially, since the pandemic started. And we have a full episode where they talk about incredible ideas. A couple highlights I wanted to share is they've hosted family trivia nights. So just like Stacy talked about doing like a virtual open house, same idea, but involving things like trivia, or we did a karaoke sing-along. So there's really fun ways for kids and families to feel connected to the school community, even from a distance. And they use GimKit. And then what that did was the librarian was modeling this program GimKit as another alternative for teachers to use for things like assessment. We have had community scavenger hunts that were really fun. They were active. They got families outside their house in a safe way, socially distanced, but they could still see each other. This actually happened to take place in Cape Hatteras. So the kids, one of the activities was actually running around the lighthouse. So they were really, really active. And it brought both the high school and the elementary school kids together, which was really neat. We've been hosting things like reading groups based on interest, based on age, and based on language. So we've had dual language learning groups. And I think, again, that idea that literacy is more than just coming together to read the same book. These kids were talking about that they had changed their Netflix settings to listen to stories in Spanish. So, I mean, these kids were learning from each other and just having a space to have conversation. And then the last one that I just feel like is really cool example is a librarian teamed up with their CTE coordinator, and they turned a remote project. They were learning about raising dairy cows, and they ended up raising money to adopt a real cow in Charlotte. And what this did was help pay for some of the education experiences. So what that turned into then was the librarian, who was connected to a dairy farmer friend in Maine, taught their kids through Zoom all kinds of cool things about Scottish coos. And then they actually talked to somebody in Scotland. So again, it's working, that CTE coordinator teaming up with a librarian really blew open this project to be very globally connected. So I just wanted to take a few minutes to really think about that idea that when we see this quote by Dr. McBride, where library is a safe place to explore new worlds, she's not just talking about opening up a book and going to Hogwarts, right? We're talking about literally zooming kids from Charlotte to Maine to Scotland, which is just so cool. And I think a lot of times our teachers in the buildings feel maybe disconnected from the library. And I just wanted to encourage you to maybe consider reaching out to your local librarian, finding out not only how can you connect and engage with kids because the librarian knows a little bit more about their interests, but also to really unlock literacy in a really much bigger way. So those are just a few ideas. Again, I know Chris dropped a few examples in there, or the link to the podcast. So if you want to hear more about these ideas, the librarians had a great time telling us a lot more about them. All right, that's all of our ideas that we had to. Oh, here's my last one. I forgot. Thanks, Brittany, for keeping me on task there. It's fast and furious, so it's hard to remember it all. But I wanted to hear if you have a way that you maybe discovered a new world through your library. It can be a story from you as a kid. If you went and had a great experience as a kid, or maybe you've done something with your librarian, like VR headsets. And again, the idea of engagement. I had to put this picture in here because I was so skeptical, y'all, of using the breakout EDU boxes until I went to NCDLCN and I was forced to do it in person with a group of adults. And man, was I sold. And then I had a lot of skeptical teachers who didn't see any value in this in the building until they had to come do it with their kids. And again, unlocked a new world. We started doing virtual breakouts and in-person breakouts long before the pandemic. And then it turned into such a great engagement tool that teachers have been using since. So that's why that's there. But I'd love to hear if anyone has something to drop in the chat about a way that a visit to a library opened up a new world to you. Could be a book, whatever. In the meantime, while you're thinking, Chris and Stacy, you got something to add, story to add?
I mean, I always have a story, but now I feel like I'm on the spot. So I don't have
Sorry.
a library story.
Oh, thank you, Linda, for sharing that.
Stacy, you're on mute.
I was practicing my wait time. So hard. But yeah, Linda, I love that too.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
That's such a cute,
Oh, that's so funny.
congratulations.
Now he's an attorney.
Nice.
You know, there you go.
You never know. I mean, he could have turned into the next Jane Goodall, but an attorney is great.
I agree with Molly about the, you know, experiencing it part of whether it's a breakout or the VR headsets or, you know, just all these different things. I think it is, it makes such a difference to be able to actually go through it. I think you remember, you know, you remember it better, obviously. And that goes back to Chris's brain science about, you know, how people actually retain information versus just being, you know, sort of, you know, told a bunch of things. Mm-hmm. So we had the same thing happen with our breakout, our first breakout. And when I say we, I mean the ITFs in Catawba County. So we were invited to go over to Burke County. They had some kits that they had gotten, and we had a you know, kind of an adjacent neighbors kind of afternoon where they walked us through I think it was the 3rd grade math breakout, and it was wonderful. It was the best ever. So, and kids love it.